Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the start of the free agency period for the 2030 to 2031 offseason. Probably not going to be a particularly active free agency period for our Buffalo Wings. We've made a lot of trades over the last few weeks since the end of the postseason, have definitely changed our roster significantly. As free agency begins, we don't have a ton of money to spend, less than $10 million. And in theory, we wouldn't mind increasing our scouting or particularly our player development budget a little more before next season begins. So I don't think we have the money to go crazy, and I don't think we have much inclination to go crazy in free agency either. That said, there are a few holes that we're going to be looking to fill on our roster over the next few months. Certainly want another left-handed arm out of the bullpen, and probably need 2 arms for the bullpen total. I would think we can probably find one in the Rule 5 draft, but we may have to hit free agency or the trade market for one of those holes, most likely the left-handed reliever, since that's a bit more specific than just a guy with an arm. Thinking about our position players, we could definitely use a solid bat with a solid glove for a corner outfield spot. We've weakened our outfield pretty materially this offseason, moving on from the likes of Nick York, Jace Barofin, and the other guy, the minor league free agent signing, whose name I've already blocked out of my mind because I've moved on from him. But in Barofin and York's particularly, those are 2 guys who have been on the Buffalo team at the major league level for all or part of all of our 7 seasons in the major leagues. So right now at this point, we've got Featherston in center field. We've got Honeycutt as our left fielder, but he's out for another 5 months, and it's already November 25th, so he's likely to maybe be healthy right at the end of spring training. Question whether he'll be fully ready for the start of the new season. And then we have last year's Rule 5 acquisition, Rafael Rodillo, competing to make the major league roster. And then we do have a guy like Vaughn Necker, who was in AAA last year and came up towards the end of the season, also competing for a spot in the outfield. But particularly with the potential that Honeycutt could miss the start of the season, and we're also not entirely sure what he'll look like on the other side of this injury. Could definitely use someone with a little bit of pop in his bat, who's not a horrible defender, maybe someone who could play left or right for us to bolster our outfield a bit. So I'd say those are the primary things that we are going to be looking to do. I have made a couple of trade offers to fill a couple of those holes. We'll see how the teams that we've made those offers to react to those offers in the coming days, probably tomorrow, given that those offers are out there now, and they're usually pretty quick with their responses. So I think we'll move forward a day, see what the responses to those trades are. You'll also see the types of guys I'm thinking we can potentially bring on board. Obviously, with the amount of money we have to spend, they're not going to be huge salary guys. And after that, we're going to take a look at the international amateur free agents for this year's class. I've already run them through one camp in October, but haven't really talked about it on an actual episode yet. So we'll take a look at some of the top prospects available there. So those of you who have strong opinions on where we should or should not go can hopefully share them with me in the comments in the coming few days. And it looks like both of our trade offers are almosts, but as we know, almost could be, yeah, the deal's done, just click, do it. Or, yeah, if you throw in your best pitcher, we'll do the deal. So we'll see what the almost in Houston means. And this looks like one that can probably get done. They want Joe Edwards, who is one of the top prospects in our system, but they're also willing to take a couple of 27-year-old minor league veterans. Ben Thomas, a 27-year-old who was in Double A for us this past year, and Davison De Los Santos, 27-year-old, who we had actually in high A ball for us. So neither of those guys is a deal breaker. I'll show you the deal that I'm looking at. We still have Hideyasu Oki in the organization, 30-year-old pitcher. Has briefly been up in Buffalo the last couple years. He was a minor league free agent signing in 2025, left-hander who came over from Japan. You can see his pitching profile is pretty borderline for a major leaguer. Good control, but his stuff and his movement below average. As a spot starter or as a 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th arm out of the bullpen, depending on how you're structuring your team. He could have a little bit of value, but I think he's mostly a replacement level type guy. Last year in AAA Albany, he was 16-9, but did have a 4.61 ERA and a 1.41 WHIP, so he certainly wasn't dominant. And he did start a game for us at the major league level. I think it was the last day of the year. Once we were locked into a playoff spot, and we just didn't want to use any of the starters that we were going to need for our playoff series. And he did not do well, giving up 8 hits, including a homer and 2 walks over 4 1/3 innings. 6.54 Sierra. I guess that's almost 6 runs better than his 12.46 ERA. But don't think he is a big-time contributor at the major league level. And we would get 26-year-old lefty Zane Adams in return. He is just a bullpen arm, a guy who at the age of 26 finally made his major league debut this past season. He was a 4th-round pick back in 2023. You can see he didn't too much at the major league level, was certainly below average in terms of his ERA plus, and his FIP minus was replacement level in terms of his WAR. But he is a left-handed pitcher, which we need. Unfortunately, he's actually not much. He's actually potentially not as effective against left-handed batters as he is against right-handed batters. So that defeats a little bit of the purpose there, but clearly there's also the factor that a left-handed hitter is likely not going to be as good against a left-handed pitcher as he is against a right-handed pitcher. So there still could be a bit of potential value there in having him for matchups, because if he's going up against a lefty, even though he's not necessarily more effective against them, they may be less effective against left-handed pitchers than they are against right-handed pitchers. But he didn't have a great season in AAA, honestly, in any of the last few years. I think he is a borderline roster guy, and he is in his last option year. But we're not giving up much to get him on board. And I think there is a pitcher or two on free agency among left-handers who could be better than Zane Adams. Who knows what's going to be available in the Rule 5 draft, but at the very least, this gives us a left-handed pitcher who we can have at the major league level. And we're not really giving up anyone who's very important to us to get it. So we are going to add Ben Thomas into that decision, or into that potential trade, and our assistant GM actually likes it. We are going to go ahead and complete the trade and bring on Zane Adams. So at least we now have a third left-handed arm to potentially be part of our pitching staff. Sean Sullivan, who's been a 5th starter for us over the course of most of his career, is still here as a lefty. And then Kyle Backus has been a good lefty out of the pen for us the last couple of years. But right now, that's it for lefties who are really in intense competition to make our 26-man roster next year. So the opportunity to have another lefty in the mix in terms of Zane Adams is not the worst thing in the world. We do have a guy in AAA who could also potentially be in the mix, is a left-handed pitcher for us, and that's Drew Graham. Again, he's more of a replacement levelish type guy, but at least he's a lot younger than Oki. We still think he may have potential to improve his ratings a little bit. I would tend to think that Zane Adams has a better chance of making the team than Graham does. But at least we've got another left-hander in the mix to make our 26-man roster, and we'll see if perhaps we can upgrade in the coming weeks and months. And on to now the other deal that we were looking at, and this one we might be able to get done too. They're looking for some big-time prospects and a pitcher that we really like in Harlan Susanna, but also some veterans who we have in our minor league system would get the deal done. We do have to give up a mid-level prospect, I would say, Brad Rapaski, who was a fourth-round draft pick of ours in 2027, split this past year between A and high A ball, combined for 17 home runs, but was certainly much more effective at the A level than he was at high A Jamestown. Almost 22 years old. If he fully develops, he's a useful-ish major league bat as a corner outfielder, but not great defensively, not a ton of speed, and at this point in his development, definitely question how often he's going to strike out and how frequently he's going to walk. So not a big-time prospect, and as I mentioned, it does look like we could include Ozzie Albies, who was a minor league free agent signing before this past season, who we just used to bolster our Class A team, and Brendan Donovan, the veteran, who was also a minor league signing at about the same time, who we did have in AAA. So I think we would happily throw in either of them. We're not going to give up Carmona, Zapp, or Duque, who are three of the top prospects on our organization, and we're not going to give up a guy who we think is going to be a good starting pitcher for us for the next several years in Harlan Susanna. But we'll give up Albies or Donovan along with Rapaski, and we're going to get a corner outfielder in return, Shaylin Polanco. Definitely not a star. He is a guy who finally made his major league debut in Miami this end of this past season. Hit .261 with 3 homers and 46 at-bats. Looks like his bat's got a little bit of pop, and he can walk a little bit, but certainly think he's going to be close to a league average type of bat. Is a little better potentially against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching, which should help him a little bit. But he is a competent left or right fielder. He is not great at either position, but he's another guy who is making the major league minimum and fills in some of those holes that we've kind of opened up by getting rid of expensive corner outfielders this past offseason, notably Nick York and Jace Barofin. So given that if Rapaski fully develops, he's probably slightly better than Polanco, but there's no guarantee that he completely develops, and we need somebody today in Polanco, and then I'm happy to put in a Donovan or an Albies into the deal to get it done, because they're both unhappy or angry with their roles in our organization anyways. I think we will likely send Donovan along. He's angry rather than unhappy, and he was in AAA. Albies we can probably make a little happier by promoting him up towards AAA this coming year. So we are going to add Brendan Donovan into the deal and bring Shaylin Polanco on board. I don't think he's a superstar either. Similar to Adams, he's a guy who could help us. He's making the major league minimum, so it's not a big investment. We don't have to give up a ton for him to pick him up in trade. And it's conceivable that he makes the 26-man roster. It's even conceivable, depending on what happens with Honeycutt, that he could be in our starting lineup in left or right field on opening day. I don't think that's a perfect scenario with both of these guys that we're making the trades for. My hope is that as the offseason moves along, we can find somebody better than them in the Rule 5 or the trade market or free agency as prices come down. But adding these two guys, I think, makes our 40-man roster better today than it was yesterday. So we are going to go ahead and complete the trade for Polanco as well. So one day into the free agency period, we haven't added any free agents, but we have spent a little bit of money bringing on both Adams and Polanco at major league minimum contracts. But as I said, those potentially fill our needs-ish for a left-handed reliever and a corner outfielder. Didn't cost much to do it. And if there's an opportunity to upgrade from those guys as the offseason moves along, we haven't invested a lot to bring either of them on board. So as I said, I think we've definitely made the 40-man roster a little better already. And we've at least built out a little depth potentially for the 26-man roster, and given ourselves a couple of insurance policies with those guys if the money that players are looking for just doesn't work for us. We can start the season with those guys on the roster, hopefully have a little more money available that we can put into potentially scouting and player development a few months from now, and still hopefully have the financial flexibility to maybe address those needs if they become bigger needs closer to the trade deadline next season, if it ends up being something that we can't upgrade on over the next few months. And before we dip into those international amateur free agents, we've got an interesting trade proposal from the Dodgers. They want our third baseman, Jace Young. And I know there are several of you out there that don't love Young. I don't love him either. He is a replacement level-ish type guy. The reason I brought him back this offseason so far is that I had a hard time seeing in the trade market or in the free agent market a guy who was as close to replacement level-ish as Young that we could afford that would be available. That said, the Dodgers have offered us 34-year-old left-handed reliever Caleb Ferguson. We were just talking about how we needed a left-handed reliever. And over the course of his major league career, Caleb Ferguson has definitely been a good one. He's really not any more effective against left-handers than he is against right-handers. So similar profile, although better, to Adams, who we just picked up. The issue is that Ferguson is making $6.9 million each of the next couple years. So we would be bringing on a considerable amount of dollars to bring him on board, given that the Nationals have retained 30% of Jace Young's contract. If the Dodgers would keep all of Ferguson's contract, I would certainly think about it. Right now, if we do this deal, our money drops by $1.4 million. But if the Dodgers don't even have the capability to retain 100% of his contract, but they could retain 60% of his contract, and that would improve our money by $2.8 million. I don't know that I would even do this if they offered it, if they accepted it, but that would at least give me interest in taking another look at the third base market and just seeing if there's potentially somebody we could bring on if we move on from Young, because Ferguson would be an upgrade over Adams and probably even an upgrade over Backus. He'd probably be the best left-handed arm in our bullpen. So that would be a nice upgrade there. The question is whether we can find an appropriate replacement for Jace Young with very limited money. But again, this deal as it's structured now would open up about $2.8 million in additional money for us to try to do that with. So we'll throw it out there to the Dodgers. I don't think they're going to want to keep 60% of his contract. Yep, and they said no way. But they would do it. We're not going to trade Duque, who's, I believe, the top prospect in our system at number 39. But Ozzie Albies, I would put him in to get it done. I guess I need to do a little work on the third basemen that are out there. I don't think there is much that's practical for us to pursue in terms of free agency. You can see the top guys are all 10, 15, $25 million a year. Jonathan Aranda is a guy who we could afford, but he's worse defensively and probably worse offensively than Jace Young. Luis Arias, worse defensively, fragile, pretty average-ish to below average player at this point, it looks like. Nicandro Ibar out of the Dominican. Again, with that arm, it's probably a little bit of a downgrade defensively, even from Jace Young. I like a little bit of pop and the ability to draw walks. He was in the independent leagues last year where he had a monster season, but looking for almost $3 million. Last time he was in affiliated baseball, he was in Double-A a couple years ago, and he hit 222. So certainly no guarantees what he is going to do at the major league level. Cam Collier's not looking for big money. His range is pretty much shot, even though he's only 27 years old. Does have a little speed, not a horrible bat, but I'd say when all is said and done, I think he's a downgrade from Jace Young. Also, Tommy Edman, he would be an upgrade defensively, even though he doesn't really have a third baseman's arm, but fragile, looking for good money, not much of a bat, 35 years old. Bo Bichette, fragile, similar-ish defensively at third. The bat, I'm not expecting him to do what he did in 2029, that's for sure. But last year, his bat, maybe similar to Jace Young's. And he's looking for $3.5 million. So it doesn't seem to me that there's any obvious answers in free agency. J-Del Flores, again, similar-ish defensively. Got a little pop in the bat, but looking for $6 million. So I'll take a look at the potential trade market. If there's a way for us to get another third baseman, I'm definitely amenable to moving on from Jace Young. I don't love him. I think he's a little bit better than a replacement level guy, but I don't want to go from a little bit above replacement level to below replacement level at that position, which is certainly possible. I guess the other thing we should consider is Vaughn Neckar ready to be an everyday third baseman? He's worse defensively than Jace Young, but I could argue that that bat could be a little better than Jace Young at the major league level. And again, there's nothing left for Neckar to prove in AAA after hitting 281 with 38 homers and 110 ribbies there last year. So we could turn the position over to Vaughn Neckar second round pick from 2025 making the major league minimum. So that would open up more money for us. 50 range, 50 error, 60 arm. Those are all kind of at the borderline bottom of what I would want in a third baseman. But to be fair, Young is only 5 notches better in terms of his infield error rating. The 3 ratings I probably care about most: contact 55, home run power 50, and I 60. Compare that to Necker. The contact is 45, but it could be 50. The home run power is 55. It could be 60. The I is 50. They're not all that different players. Necker potentially has a little more home run pop in his bat. So I guess there is an argument that maybe Vaughn Necker is the answer at third base if we can't pull off a trade for somebody. And then at the very least, we're upgrading at third base. Maybe a small downgrade we're upgrading at left-handed pitcher. And then maybe a small downgrade at third base. But we're also opening up $2.7 million in payroll to invest more in our farm system and scouting, or to invest more in free agents when their prices come down, or to have to spend in the draft next year, to take on salary close to the trade deadline next year. It does give us more financial flexibility. So there is a part of me thinking that maybe we make this trade even if we can't find a trade for another third baseman, because I think Young for next year is a little better than Necker. But I've got to be honest, Young was a below average bat, and he was a win above replacement when everything is rolled into what he did last season. So I don't think that putting Vaughn Necker in that position is necessarily a huge downgrade. And we'd be getting better, as I said, out of the bullpen, and we'd be saving some money. And as much as I don't love Jace Young, and I know as much as some of you hate Jace Young, when I do a search for third basemen who meet his criteria, 50 defense, 55 contact, 50 power, and 60 I, there's only 4 of them out there. One of them is the guy that we just traded away, bouncing back from the injury, Marcelo Meyer. Another is Kenny Lavari, who's making $27.6 million this year, and his arbitration number next year is projected to be $37 million. Clearly, we cannot bring him on board. There's our guy, Jace Young, and then there's Cam Collier. Would not mind bringing him on board if it's possible. Certainly a big upgrade, a guy who making the major league minimum this year, less than $4 million next year, and he does look better defensively, driven by somewhat higher error rating and a much better arm than either Necker or Young. Would love that the range be better, but he's clearly an upgrade over either of those guys defensively, clearly an upgrade over either of those guys offensively. I'm guessing he's going to be exorbitantly expensive to pick up a 26-year-old third baseman who's still making the major league minimum and has put up 2.4 and 2.9 WARs in his first 2 full seasons in the majors. But I'll at least explore it. If we could pick him up without totally ripping apart our farm system, he would definitely stabilize the third base position for us for probably several years to come. And getting Young off of our books would help us pay for Collier a bit over the next few years when he's going to be making more money in arbitration. But again, I'm just not expecting that we're going to be willing to offer what the White Sox need. And we've got an offer out there that they didn't say no to. We have to include one of the top prospects in our organization to potentially get it done. And I don't know that it will. I had put together some offers with 4 or 5 kind of mid to high level prospects, and we were getting close, but we always needed one of the top prospects to get it done. So we'll see. And so I pared back some of those middling prospects, and it's now a 3-for-1 deal with 1 big prospect from our organization and 2 less impressive prospects. We'll see whether that'll get it done. It would be really interesting if we could come out of this with a upgrade at third base, an upgrade to a left-hander out of our bullpen, and more money to spend. Now, granted, as I said, we're getting rid of one of the better prospects in our organization, but I don't hate what the potential result of these 2 trades could be. And I know that I promised you we're going to look at international amateur free agents, and we will shortly. But right now, I'm 100% focused on seeing if maybe we can get these trades done. All right, so let's see. They say we're almost there. And we are almost there. So we have to throw in another prospect, but there's guys who are not big-time prospects, and there's guys who are older there. So we would be getting the 26-year-old third baseman Cam Collier in return. He is a clear upgrade offensively and defensively to either Young or Necker. He's making a lot less money than Jace Young. So I think that's kind of an obvious move in terms of talent. To pick him up, though, we have to give third baseman Joe Wiedenhoft, 21-year-old, not as good as Collier with the glove, although I do like his range better, or the bat. And he's a guy who, if we move on from Collier, or if we bring Collier on board, his future in our organization is kind of blocked anyways. His bat's not as good. I like his range better, but his error and his arm are both significantly worse. So I don't mind losing Wiedenhoft. Minor league reliever Juan Leyva, guy we picked in the 5th round a couple years ago, 20 years old, hasn't pitched above rookie ball. He's fragile. He's got a bad personality. Could, if he fully develops, be a useful left-handed arm out of the back of the bullpen, so I don't like giving those up, but certainly not going to hold up a deal for a potential above-average third baseman because of him. But we had to include center fielder Rodolfo Carmona, who was our international free agent signing in 2027. And he's no longer listed as a top 100 prospect, but I'm pretty confident that he is ranked in the next area. Yeah, he's ranked 110th overall in terms of prospects. So not a premier prospect, but still a good prospect. Potential for his contact, gap power, and his home run power to all be well above average if he completely develops. He's got some speed. He's got a little range in the outfield. Concerns are he's not going to draw a lot of walks, and he's going to strike out a crazy amount of time. He did finally graduate from rookie ball this past year, hit .295 with 10 homers in rookie ball, but he struggled when we moved him up to A ball. Hit a .115 with 1 home run in 87 at-bats, and he struck out 47 times. I mean, even in rookie ball, he was striking out more than a third of the time. So if that contact gap power and home run power all completely develop, you'll live with the fact that he's striking out a couple hundred times a year at the major league level. But there's certainly no guarantee as a guy who's going to be turning 21 in a little over 3 weeks that he's going to fully develop in all of those areas. So he's a very good prospect who could become a very good major league player. But the way I look at it, we're getting a pretty good major league player who's only 26 years old in return. And granted, he's going to be in arbitration next year and start making more money. But Collier is a guy who over the course of his career has definitely been above average in terms of his offensive play. He's averaged a 3 WAR for every 162 games that he's played at third base. He's a clear upgrade to Jace Young with the bat. He's a clear upgrade to Jace Young with the glove. And if we make this trade for Collier and then trade away Jace Young to the Dodgers, oh, this trade offer has expired. Well, that's a bummer. I guess since yesterday they probably traded away Caleb Ferguson. Or no, he's still there. Wonder what happened. I don't love that. But honestly, as much as I would love to get Caleb Ferguson, oh, I know why it's expired. They probably signed somebody else and they probably can't retain a full 60% of his contract anymore. So let us see if we know that they would, well, we think they would do it for Ozzie Albies. If we discuss this again, yeah, 60% is, that's the issue. They've signed somebody else. So they can only retain 25% of Caleb Ferguson's contract. So that is not as attractive to us. We'll have him for a little over $5 million each of the next 2 years. But it's still an upgrade for our bullpen with his left-handed arm. Not a long-term commitment. And we're still money positive. I wonder if we could get them to give us, they probably don't have cash to give us. Okay, we can get them to give us, it looks like $200,000. Every little helps. We may not even have to put in Albies anymore. So let's submit that offer to the Dodgers. But regardless, I think we can get Jace Young off the books in most of his contract, or hopefully all of his contract off the books regardless. So I'm going to bring Cam Collier on board. Carmona is a high price to pay, but Cam Collier is a pretty good third baseman. And he's young. He's a guy we can hopefully build around. And that lets us potentially use Vaughn Necker next year if he makes the team in more of a utility role as a backup third baseman, backup first baseman, backup corner outfielder, where we could still potentially get him a few hundred at-bats. So we will add in Elio Campos to get the deal done. Carmona is not a low price to pay, but to me it's not a crippling price to pay either for an above average major league third baseman who's under our control for the next 4 seasons through the prime of his career. the way Carmona strikes out, there's no guarantees that he's going to be ultimately a successful major league hitter. There's no guarantees he's going to reach his full potential. Wiedenhoft we don't need. Leyva, a decent left-hander out of the bullpen, but not a deal breaker. And then Campos is a 26-year-old first baseman who's just organizational filler. So we're going to go ahead and complete this trade. The fans very excited for Cam Collier to take over as our new third baseman. So am I, quite honestly. So Collier and Polanco, who we haven't even added onto the Major League roster, are here. Now we just have to wait to hear back from the Dodgers to see if we can get Jace Young off the books and add another left-handed arm for our bullpen. And we've heard back from the Dodgers, and yeah, we can get this deal done at this point. Obviously would love if we had been able to get them to keep 60% of his contract, but I guess I could have done the deal a couple days ago. It's just there was no guarantee that we were going to be able to get a deal done for Cam Collier. I just didn't know how much we were going to need to pay for him. I guess there's an argument if, with hindsight being 2020, if I had decided that I was okay with Vaughn Necker being our third baseman, if we couldn't get Collier, to have done the deal right now. But the fact that a good chunk of the Dodgers' money would disappear overnight was probably, I guess maybe I should have been thinking about that, but I'm not going to lie, it was not on the top of my radar of things to be concerned about. So we'll figure out who we're going to throw in to get this deal done. It'll save us some money getting Young off the books, and we'll upgrade at left-handed reliever with Ferguson. So we're going to add Davison De Los Santos, 27-year-old minor league first baseman, into the deal, along with Jace Young, get his salary off our books. We've already upgraded at third base. They've only got $14,000 left if they make this trade, retaining 25%, so that's the most that they can retain. And why is it not letting me complete this trade? Respond to message. Add Davison De Los Santos and discuss. Okay, there we go. We can complete the trade. So we're going to bring Ferguson on board. So it's been a very busy few days with these trades, more than I expected. We've added 2 left-handed arms to the bullpen with Ferguson and Adams. We've added a corner outfield with Polanco. And we've upgraded as our starting third baseman, bringing Cam Collier on board. And after doing all of those things, we've still got almost over $7.5 million to play with. So I think this is probably the heavy lifting of our offseason. As I mentioned, we've still got the Rule 5 ahead, can probably find a corner outfielder or maybe a arm for the bullpen there, and who knows what else. Still wouldn't mind upgrading at backup catcher, but we're going to have Basallo on the roster this year as potential very mediocre defensive backup. And then we still have Tanner, Shillette, and Springer in the organization as guys who would be a little better than Basallo defensively, but not great defensively, who could be backup catchers. So if there ends up being a defensive wizard with a little bit of a bat on the market in a couple months, we could go after him. But I don't know that there's a lot much more we're going to be doing this offseason. So given that it's November 30th, before we are unable to run our camp in November, it is clearly time to do that and to dig in at long last to the long-promised review of the international amateur free agents. And we'll go through some of the top prospects that are available. A couple of guys we see as having 5-star potential. Right fielder Humberto Chiquis. Don't love that he's fragile, but certainly looks like he could have a potentially interesting bat with well above average contact and home run power. Not a great defensive outfielder. Ignacio Mendoza is the other 5-star prospect. Another mediocre defensive corner outfielder, no speed, but potentially an even more impressive bat, arguably, than Humberto Chiquis. Julio Contilla is a catcher, below average defensively, pretty rotten personality, but decent bat potentially for a catcher. Second baseman Jorge Garza, like the durability, really like the potential bat that could be above average to excellent in every category if he develops. Not really a guy with a position in the infield. He's listed as a second baseman, but I guess at 6'5", you could definitely play him at first base if that bat fully develops. You could play him in left field if you had to, but he's a first base / DH. But with that bat, if it fully develops and that durability, that's okay. He's not a bad prospect. Eddie Izaguirre is a starting pitcher. Like the durability, like the potential 3 pitches. His stuff and his movement above average to borderline exceptional. Expected to have average control. Not a bad prospect. Luis Miranda, another starting pitcher, looks more like a reliever based on where we think that changeup's going to go, but could be a lights-out reliever, like the work ethic, like that he's 16 years old and already throwing in the mid-90s. Depending on the type of money he's only looking for $800,000. I wouldn't think about typically going after someone who I know is going to be a reliever. But with the money he's looking for, he's an interesting prospect. Alvaro Romero out of Panama. Another 3-pitch guy. Really like the personality. Really like the durability. Left-hander. Looks like borderline exceptional stuff. Good movement on his pitches and average control. A lot of stamina. Decent at holding runners. Not a bad prospect. And last but not least, among the 4-star prospects, Masao Zavalos out of Brazil. Another guy who's durable. Good range for an outfielder, not really center field range. His error rating is troubling. Average arm. But a potentially decent bat if he fully develops. I'd say Zavalos and probably Julio Contilla, just based on the personality, are the 2 that I like the least out of this crew. But you can see that based on the relationships with most of these guys, a lot of them, all of them, quite honestly, except Zavalos, were run through our initial international amateur free agent camp in October. So right now, of those 8 guys who are 4-star potential or higher, plan on inviting everyone except Contilla and Zavalos to camp. We'll see if we can find 4 guys among the 3-star potential players to potentially bring. Domingo Aguiar, I'd consider. Not an exceptional prospect. Jesus Aguirre, similar. I'd consider bringing him, but I don't love him. Daniel Bustos, pass on him. Don't love the personality, even though it looks like his bat could be decent. David Erevez, left-handed pitcher. Like the durability. Don't love that he's slow to absorb instruction from his coaches, but he's got a potential 5 to 6 pitch arsenal. Decent stuff, decent movement, decent control. I'd still consider bringing him in. Luis Espinoza, another starting pitcher. Forkball, you don't see that every day. Not a horrible prospect either. Wish he was a little better at holding runners. Jesus Pantoja, starting pitching prospect. He's definitely a guy who could be more of a reliever. The slider we don't think is going to be major league quality. If the changeup doesn't develop, he's a two-pitch guy with a fastball and a sinker essentially. So he's a little less interesting to me than Irives and Espinoza. Arturo Resendez, like his personality, and it's a similar-ish bat to those first couple guys, Aguirre and Aguiar. Right now, I'd be leaning towards. Actually, right now, I'm definitely going to take Irives, Espinoza, and the Resendez. We're going to give those 3 invitations. And now we've got 1 invitation left that'll either go to one of Aguiar or Aguirre or David Valdivino. Valdivino, I like the durability. Maybe a slightly average major league bat. Doesn't bring a ton to the table defensively for a second baseman. Aguirre is also an infielder. I don't love his bat at much, but at least you could play him at third or first and not feel bad about it. Valdivino, I don't know exactly where you play him besides first base. And then Domingo Aguiar, I do like his range, do like his durability, do like the plus potential contact and gap power. I think I like Domingo Aguiar the best of those guys. So Aguiar gets the last invite. We've got these 10 guys invited to camp now. Go to the international scouting screen. And why will it not let us run practice? Is it because it's the last day of the month or something and I hosed myself? That is really weird. I think I probably got caught up with all the excitement over those trades, but it's still November. I don't understand why it won't let me run this practice. Well, that's odd. But it is what it is. Obviously, we'll not have as good scouting and as good relationships with people if we're only able to run 3 international amateur free agent practices. If you do not manually run the practice, your scout will automatically invite players and run it on the final day of each month. All right, so I guess maybe that's what happened. He still ran a practice for us today, but it wasn't necessarily the players that I liked. So that does explain to an extent how we had strong relationships with these 2 guys already, because after I ran the first month, I didn't spend tons of time looking at it, but I didn't think we had any strong relationships just out of that first month. And that also does explain, because I had my 10 players set up who were here a month ago, and they disappeared when I clicked on this screen today. So I think it was because the last day of the month, it keeps me from doing something stupid and only getting to run 3 camps, but I didn't necessarily get to invite everybody that I wanted. So it is what it is. At least we did run a camp. It wasn't a perfect one, but we know a little more about the people. We will finish today. And the Nashville Stars making us an offer for Humberto Duque. We continue to scout out some of our prospects on that international amateur free agent list. And now, given that it is December 1st, and I've already got it all set up with the 10 guys that I was interested in, we're going to run a camp today, 2 days back to back, run the practice, and see what we think of these guys. Rives, we think, is slightly less of a prospect than before. We're up to high scouting accuracy on everyone except the Rives at this point. on. We do have another camp that we're going to be able to run in January. So we're going to keep scouting these players, run a final camp in January, and hopefully put a strategy together to bring a little bit of talent onto our system after we had to trade away one of the top prospects in our system in Carmona to bring on our new third baseman. And I guess I should at least see tentatively what our new bench coach Crawford would do with the lineup. He'd put Cam Collier right into the 2-hole. Honestly, with Seifu and his contact and speed in the 1-hole, and then Collier, who's really good with contact, a good eye already that could get better. Not a bad number 2 hitter. Not blistering speed, but he, stole 6 bases each of the last couple of years. Had a decent success rate 2 years ago. Last season, 6 for 14. Definitely not what you're looking for. Don't think I'll be running with him all that frequently, but I don't know. Cautiously optimistic about this offense. Collier, definitely an upgrade at third base. Swanson is an upgrade defensively at shortstop over Meyer. Admittedly, probably not the same bat, but a lot less injury concerns. Right now, Radillo and Polanco are penciled in as our corner outfielders. That is certainly not optimal, but we need to kind of think that Vance Honeycutt should be taking over one of those corner outfield spots at some point. Hopefully the torn UCL doesn't damage his normal injury proneness. Hopefully it doesn't have a big impact on any of his ratings. His arm is already not that strong, but would love to see him come back as a well above average offensive player like he's been the first several seasons of his major league career. And with the fact that in just the past few days we have, as I said, added 2 left-handed relievers, upgraded at third base, and added a corner outfielder, we've done a lot of the lifting that we want to do this offseason. So again, can obviously change these numbers, but my goal has been to get scouting and player development back up towards the levels we had them at 3, 4, 5 seasons ago before we started going on a spending spree. So I'm going to throw a little bit more money into those budgets right now. You can see we've still got close to $5 million to spend. I don't think we're going to be huge players in free agency, but again, if there's a potentially impactful player who's looking for 6, 7, 8 million a year now, that in 2 or 3 months is looking for 2 or 3 or 4 million, we've got the capacity to bring on somebody like that. We've clearly got the Rule 5 draft ahead of us. And actually should see if I could go to where I really want to. Our recommended draft slot amounts are a little higher this upcoming year also. So we won't quite put in every penny that they think we need there, but at least want to have enough set aside. So that gives us, over $3.5 million to still play with. And clearly, if we decide to go wild at some point, we can pull a bunch of money out of scouting and player development. I'm hoping we don't do that. The whole point of this offseason has been to right-size our salary structure, and you can see we're on pace for $154 million this year, which is a drop of about $40 million from where we were when the offseason started. And even next year, we're only at $166 million, because you have to keep in mind, we've gotten some expensive guys, not just Meyer, but we've now gotten Jace Barofin, Jace Young off of the books for next year as well, among others. The big decision at this point next year is going to be whether Samuel Basallo is somebody that we want to bring back. And it looks like his arbitration number, even though he hasn't played a game since the end of the regular season, and he has won a Silver Slugger Award for the 3rd consecutive year in his 3 years in the majors since the end of the regular season. His ARB number for 2032 has still come down from around 16 million to around 13.5 million. So he could definitely be in play. Would love to think about getting Cam Collier locked up to a long-term extension. Yeah, 18 million a year in his prime, so 6 years, $86 million. Not a bargain, but next year's number is not that bad for him. You know, those latter 2 years of arbitration are the ones where we may have to really think about structuring the deal or buying something out. Certainly the 2033 season, when Basallo potentially is 20 million, Honeycutt's close to a 15 million player, Ota's a $10 million player, Cam Collier's close to a $10 million player, Featherston's a $5 million player. That's the year where you can see the contracts continue to go up. But even with all of that happening, the fact that Ohtani drops off the roster and Swanson drops off the roster potentially before then makes it not a huge increase from where we were the year before. Obviously, we're opening up some big holes on the roster, losing a starting shortstop and losing our ace pitcher. But I think we're in a much better position financially than we were at the start of the offseason. And I think we're in a much better position, quite honestly, than we were a few days ago in game time when this episode began. So since I have been rambling about trades and international free agency for some time now, I will mercifully let you go. If you are still watching, thank you so much for watching. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as to maybe where we should go and not go in international amateur free agency, what you think about the trades, and what else you think we should focus on doing this offseason. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.